Hey, Forge FC fans, thanks so much for checking in. It's Louie B, your digital host in beautiful Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island. I'm very pleased to be joined by my friend, probably the one person who has been covering this team more than I have, or longer than I have, definitely longer than I have, before it was even a team, before it was even a league. Steve Milton from the Hamilton Spectator on your screen. Milty, I know how much you wanted to be down here. I know how much I wanted you to be down here as well.
Yeah.
It's great to see you, and let's just start. I mean, it's been a great tournament. I think full credit to the organizers, the league, and PEI for managing to pull this off.
Well, that's what it looks like from the outside for sure. And I was going to ask you if it seems to be that way on the inside, because I've been pretty, I thought the television broadcasts were a little off at the start, but they're really good now. And the surrounding product has been terrific. All of the shows that go with it, the analysis, the controversy they try to create, which is great. And, I think it's been outstanding for the league. And in fact, I just spoke with Bob Young just before we are speaking, and just about how necessary it was for a startup league to have been able to do this. It on a lot of levels. I mean, we're speaking, you and I at the moment, we're singing to the choir, right? So anybody who's watching this cares. Mm-hmm. But you have to also think about people who were sort of casual fans last year and wondering if this thing, even the naysayers, I would say even investors, Lewis, if you look at people who might have been thinking of investing and they say, whoa, these guys found a way to get it going here. They used their own money for this to get at least going, that kind of thing. There's no way they didn't take a financial hit. And they did it. It might be something that puts something over the line, including people who vote on communities, on whether there be stadiums and that kind of thing. Not that I'm a big fan of communities giving stadia to private enterprise, but you can do it through games, right? By having the game.
And the virtual stadium, like you say, as someone who's worked a part of this crew, like pretty extensively with this Media Pro crew, again, you mentioned the product they put on has been just about fantastic. The eyeballs that have put on it, CBC picking up the games right away. You got broadcasters in India, Africa, Fox Sports 2 in the United States. I mean, just how important is it to have this exposure that, like you say, if a couple of dollars, if it is a couple of dollars loss, the exposure that this season is going to have on this league, especially a competitive season, not just two teams running away with it. Just what does that mean for this league moving forward? I think
it means a great deal to the league moving forward. Now we can I wouldn't say nitpick there. I think they're very real things that have to be pointed out here. Let's not forget there's been a content void, so everybody's been trying to get content. But the fact that this content was deemed worthy to be on those networks, one. B, let's not forget the gambling aspect that a lot of networks, of course, and this is of course what the Spanish media company was looking at. They knew that there would be a market for this around the world. The only people that didn't know that were people in Canada and maybe the U.S. So I think it's just a major coup because of the television situation, that being I shouldn't say television, broadcast, which is mostly streaming now, situation. This was very, very important to keep this going, or you don't want to lose that kind of pinhole that you've already established. For a second year league, a second year off would have been absolutely devastating. But to have pulled it off with competitive balance too, that's the other thing. I mean, I would say some of the scores don't reflect necessarily what's gone on the pitch, but they have been close, and look at the teams. Admittedly, short seasons, you get a lot of bunching going on, but that's fine. There's clearly been an updraft from what Forge and Cavalry created last year. Clearly, and I think the team that's in the final against Forge is the best example of that.
Yeah, Ottawa coming in as an expansion team. I mean, there's so many questions about just what they would be able to do. And then they come out and they kind of shocked the world. Like I made the joke, it was no expansion Toronto Raptors beating the Chicago Bulls, but to beat Cavalry, to get that kind of recognition on the stage here in the CPL season has been pretty incredible.
Well, I think so. And the changes that people like, Halifax realized they made a mistake in the construction of their roster last year. A lot of teams did. And a lot of teams addressed it in a tremendous way. And I think that's what I meant about the example, this being the best example of that reconstruction of a roster to get closer to the two teams that had set the example last year. I want to say guessed right. I would say Cavalry and Hamilton guessed right last year on what it was going to take. And that would be a group that had already played together. And
yeah, you mentioned Rob Gale. I mean, defensively, that team went from, the most goals allowed last year. They pick up a guy like Andrew Jean-Baptiste, give him an opportunity to go out there. And then the addition of Pamadou Ka to the coaching staff out there for Pacific.
Yeah.
That's a team that I don't think anyone wanted to play if they made it to the finals. Let's talk about the 2020 final here, because it is Forge FC getting back there. And was this expected? We know that the competition was going to step up, but Forge FC, they had 17 of the 22 guys from last year's team back with the club this year. I mean, was anything less than the finals? Wouldn't that have been a bit of a surprise?
Yes, I think it would have. And that said, though, remembering who the Forge are and how they've done things, which is sort of this gradual wearing down of things, which is why I think you've seen them do so well near the end of the tournament, because they're good planners. They think ahead. They've been in this situation where they've played every 2 or 3 days for quite a stretch last year through August and September, and we're kind of used to it that way. But one thing that they didn't have was that clearly dominant player. Now, at the start of last year, he didn't look clearly dominant. You didn't know that Borges was going to turn out to be who Borges became. Right. So, and you can see what that kind of player, or the development of that kind of player, did. And you can see it in Halifax with Hakeem Garcia, who is second year in the league now. Right. And look, he's dominant. He's a classic striker. I'll wait around for 87 minutes if you want, and then I'll score 3 goals in the final 2 minutes. So that's the kind of thing that the Forge, they thought they had those guys, but they are just starting to develop now. I thought that's what with the game this week was really important to see Moba Bully come on.
Yeah.
Very important, because he could be that kind of guy.
And it seemed like there was a weight off Moba Bully's shoulders a little bit to score that goal. I mean, he set up 2 beautiful goals earlier in the tournament to Kyle Becker. The one to give them the late victory over Pacific, another one to tie the game. So, I mean, he's one of those guys. And Paulo Sebak, I don't think anyone was expecting him to be Tristan Borges, but he has that Borges explosiveness where he's one of those guys who, I remember you and I having this conversation where Borges would think he could get through about 4 different guys.
Yeah, I know.
You and I would always joke about, okay, there's 1, 2, and 3. That's kind of the way Paulo Sebak plays, where he plays aggressive, and sometimes it's going to create, turnovers, but they'll take it if he has that explosive skill.
If he does. Now, that's one of the problems with a 10-game season. First of all, you got to know your opposition. You got to know where the holes are. You got to know who's backing you up and those kinds of things. I don't think he's done yet. And I don't think there's only 1 game left, but there's potential for a few more games here this season. That's the other thing people forget about this league. How much is at stake on Saturday? I mean, unless they cancel it, which is entirely possible, Forge has at least 1 more game, whether they win or lose on Saturday, right? I mean, that would be in the CONCACAF League first round. Unless they cancel it. And I don't think many of us believe that's actually going to come off, but maybe it does. And there's a lot at stake here. And that's why you want to keep going here, because you want to be able to, and that's what's the depth of this roster, particularly up front. They've got way more depth in the back 5 than they had last year. And that's been very, very important there. And that's helped. And it really has shown in the last little while. I think you had to be disappointed with their back 4. In general, over the first few games, because they weren't dominating and they were letting those balls as they did last year. But they got Edgar the whole time this year, and they added a new strong player in the middle as well. So I think you expected a bit more there, but you've seen it the last couple of games. You really saw it against Calgary. And
just a quick, not a quick defense of that point, but I mean, Johnny Grant goes down, 30 minutes into the first game. Dom Samuel, is a great right back, but I mean, a great defensive right back, and someone who I don't think they had planned to play 90 minutes.
Not against a guy who's 6'4".
Exactly. And now you got Eli Cisse. We saw him at right back. And I talked to Bobby before we saw him in that game. I'm like, you ever play Cisse at right back before? He's like, no, this is the first time. And for a young guy who, again, there's still a little bit of a language barrier there. He really took that right back role and did pretty well with it.
And the offense that they try to create, of course. And this is where Halifax has had more success against them than any other team. Mm-hmm. And that's been the sneaky thing about Halifax. They've played Hamilton better than anybody, at least on the scoreboard. The pitch, they give away a lot of territorial advantage generally, and have most of the time to Hamilton. But the score is always there, and all it takes is one little thing. But what they've done is prevent that play through the middle that gets to that open channel, particularly on the right side, that Bobby's always loved to do with his back, and the Canadian national team loves to do with that right side back, and a lot of CPL or BPL teams are using it straight up the alley there, and they've got the guys that can do it. Johnny in there, or it can be the left side too, I guess, if Cisse, depending on who's in there, but they create that channel. Halifax, and watch for this on Saturday, just tries to take that away. And part of that is by triangulating, I think, Becker and whoever else is trying to forge it in the middle, and stopping that pass from going from the outside. And
it cost him. I mean, it cost him in the first game, right? I mean, third
absolutely.
Minute, that's what happened. They pushed him into the middle, and then it was a quick turnover.
Somebody turned the wrong way. Yeah. Instead of turning left or right, he turned left into the play. Next thing you know, the ball's in the net. And I mean, next thing you know, It was like 3 seconds.
Yeah, you know? You talked about it. There's a lot at stake for this game, not just the North Star Shield, of course, which is on display here in Charlottetown, but a spot in the Canadian Championship final. A one-game playoff for the Voyager Cup against an MLS side. I don't want us to handicap the chances here, but just to have that exposure to be able to go up against and measure yourself against a Major League Soccer club, what would that do for this league and for the team that makes it? Hopefully it's the one here behind me.
I think tremendous. I think it's tremendous for the league if they can do well. Now, and it's funny because I was talking to Bob Young. I'm saying, if you win this, and the same goes for Halifax, you're one bad bounce away. You're one own goal away from getting into the CONCACAF League Champions League, not just the qualifying. That's where you'll go from there. And depending on the defense, I mean, nobody's going to compare the level of, and as we speak, the Montreal game hasn't been played yet. And so it's either going to be Montreal or TFC, right? So likely Montreal. But, Montreal was in tight last year against the CPL. Yeah, against Calgary, who also didn't they beat Vancouver last year?
They did.
I think after him. So it's already shown that it can happen. Now we'll see. They're not as good. They're nowhere near as good. But this is one game. That's the beauty of these one and out type things, right? And something can happen here. Well, what if the second round of CONCACAF last year had been like this year? It was only one game. Hamilton's through, right? They won 1-0. In the first game. So, who knows? Again, when there's so few goals scored, as long as you can, play defense, get some goaltending, which Hamilton's starting to do now. I mean, it was clear that Bobby said to Tristan Henry, you come and get all the crosses, because that's, if anything is going to beat us, it's going to be those drops into the box. You be the guy. And it was very, very much like the fine, don't you think, Louis, the last –
Oh yeah, for sure.
Weeks last year, where suddenly Henry's coming out and grabbing everything.
That was his aggressiveness in the box. Little quick story from the sidelines. There was a bit of a collision last game in which David Edgar went down after running into Tristan Henry, and Eddie was the first one back at the bench being like, that's what I was telling you to do. That's what I want you to do. That's the aggression that you need to play with. You got to go get those balls. And I think G, who's got four clean sheets now. Again, I don't know how the league can ignore him. I don't know how they ignored him last year in terms of the goalie of the year.
Well, I don't know. Like Carducci had one hell of a year.
Oh, he did. But just to not even be nominated in that category last season was a bit of a.
Well, I think people thought that he didn't face as many shots, but sometimes that's the Ken Dryden syndrome, right? You're
playing in front of two
really big once in a while.
In front of behind two of the best center backs in the league, and Daniel Cretson and David Edgar. And we'll finish on that point just because we're short on time here. But I did want to mention Daniel Cretson, who's one of those players who flies under the radar a little bit. I know he's been named to Teams of the Week, but when you're playing alongside a name like David Edgar, you're not going to get the recognition you deserve. Who else? Maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but Daniel Cretson for me is one of those guys who is really brought his game up another level this season, which was already good last year. But who has surprised you or impressed you the most this season from Forge FC?
On that level, I mean, of course, Becker he's in the final two for the MVP in my mind. It's him and at this moment, him and Garcia, right?
Yeah.
So although there's a couple of really good secondary players on that you got to watch, the feeding guys on Halifax. But you mentioned one, and I would say that Dom Samuel and the number of minutes, the hard minutes he puts in, because he's playing a pretty close to, he's playing a 90-meter game, right? And so I think that's been, and then I think Awua. I think that's the guy I'm thinking, boy, especially early in the tournament when some other guys were still struggling, I thought Awua was right there, right? And playing all the time. So I think those two guys off the top, 1 year showing some of that flair that I think he got, when he scored the last goal of the year last year, I think that was very important for him to get that one that clinched against Calgary at the very end, basically a tap in, of course. But I think that's one. And Cisse is another guy that's done that, but that have stepped their games up. And I think you'll see more of that. And I think Core's got a pretty good Forge here, Forge has a pretty good core here. Core has a pretty good Forge here, and to keep going. And you want that. You want this to be like the CFL in the 60s, where a lot of the same guys stay around if you can. I mean, the idea is to develop players and sell them, as we saw. And it looks like they got a few guys coming here. And but the idea is also to have somebody that the home fans can root for all the time, because you don't want an in and out. And that's the nice thing. It's too bad that the fans didn't get a chance to see this team live this year with, as you say, 18 out of 23 back, right?
Yeah.
And so some of those names are starting to become very, very familiar.
Milty, it's always great to see you. We know you'll be watching Saturday. Thanks for doing this, buddy. We're overdue for a socially distanced coffee once I'm back in Hamilton.
All right. See you back then, Louie. And I'm glad you're down there.
Thanks, Milty.